Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is part 17 of Herodotus' Histories. First, the wonders of the world's far rim, where Herodotus is at his most gloriously unreliable, and the giant ants of India that dig up gold, the winged serpents that guard the frankincense, the cinnamon carried by great birds, and his lovely rule that the ends of the earth somehow hold the finest and rarest things. Then the wheel comes round Intaphrenes, one of the seven, destroyed by his own pride, and his wife's chilling, clever choice, the long lock of Polycrates running out at last on a Persian satrap's cross, and Democedes of Croton, a slave physician who heals the king and the queen and talks his way clean out of the empire. Let us go on.
Other Indians live near the city of Kaspateros and the country of Paktiak, to the north of the other Indians. Their way of life is nearly the same as that of the Bactrians. These are the most warlike of the Indians, and they are the ones who make expeditions for the gold. In the region where they live, the land is desert because of the sand. In this desert, sandy tract, there are ants, smaller than dogs, but larger than foxes. Some of them have been caught there and are kept at the residence of the king of Persia. These ants make their homes underground and bring up the sand in just the same way as the ants found in the land of the Hellenes, which they also very closely resemble in shape. The sand they bring up contains gold. To get this sand, the Indians make expeditions into the desert. Each man yokes together 3 camels, placing a female camel in the middle and a male on each side like trace, horses to draw with her. The man himself mounts the female, taking care that she has been taken from young ones recently born, the more recent the better. Their female camels are not inferior to horses in speed, and they are also much better able to carry burdens. I will not describe the form of the camel here, since the Hellenes for whom I write already know it, but I will mention something about it that is not generally known. The camel has 4 thighs and 4 knees in its hind legs, and its organs of generation are between the hind legs, turned toward the tail. The Indians then ride out to get the gold in the manner and with the yoking I have described. They calculate the time so that they will be busy carrying it off during the greatest heat, because the heat makes the ants disappear underground. Among these peoples the sun is hottest in the morning, not at midday, as among others, but from sunrise until the time when the market closes. During this period it gives much more heat than midday in Hellas, so much that people are said to drench themselves with water then. At midday, however, the heat among the Indians is about the same as it is among other men. After midday their sun becomes like the morning sun among other peoples, and after that, as it goes farther away, it produces still greater coolness, until at sunset it makes the air very cool indeed. When the Indians come to the place with their bags, they fill them with the sand and ride back as fast as they can. According to the Persians, the ants immediately perceive them by smell and begin to pursue them. This creature, they say, is swifter than every other living thing, so that unless the Indians get a head start while the ants are gathering together, not one of them would escape. The male camels, since they are slower runners than the females, are even released from the sides of the female, one after the other, if they begin to drag behind. The females, however, remembering the young they left behind, do not slacken their pace at all. In this way, according to the Persians, the Indians obtain most of their gold. There is also other gold in their land, obtained by digging, but in smaller quantities. It seems that nature has allotted the finest things to the farthest edges of the inhabited world, just as Hellas has been allotted seasons far more fairly tempered than those of other lands. First, India, as I said a little earlier, is the most distant inhabited land toward the east. In that land, not only the animals, both birds and 4-footed beasts, are much larger than elsewhere, except for horses, which are surpassed by the Median horses called Nesaeon, but gold is also abundant. Some of it is obtained by digging, some is brought down by rivers, and some is carried off in the way I have just explained. Their 2 wild trees produce wool that surpasses sheep's wool in beauty and excellence, and the Indians wear clothing made from these trees. Arabia, again, is the farthest of inhabited lands toward the midday, and in it alone of all lands grow frankincense, myrrh, cassia, cinnamon, and gamastich. All of these except myrrh are obtained with difficulty by the Arabians. They collect frankincense by burning storax, the same storax that the Phoenicians bring from there to the Hellenes. By burning it and making smoke, they obtain the frankincense, because the trees that produce frankincense are guarded by winged serpents, small in size and of various colors, which keep watch in great numbers around each tree. These are the same kind as those that try to invade Egypt, and they cannot be driven away from the trees by anything except the smoke of storax. The Arabians also say that by now the whole world would have been filled with these serpents, if the same thing did not happen to them that I know happens with vipers. It seems that divine providence, as one would expect, since it is wise, has made cowardly animals that are good for food very prolific, so that they may not all be eaten and their race fail, while it has made bold and harmful animals produce few offspring. For example, because the hare is hunted by every beast and bird as well as by man, it is extremely prolific. It is the only beast that becomes pregnant again before its earlier young are born, and it has in its womb some young already covered with fur and others still bare. While one is just being shaped in the womb, another is being conceived. This is how it is with the hare. But the lioness, which is the strongest and most courageous of creatures, gives birth to one cub only once in her life, because when she gives birth she casts out her womb together with the cub. The reason is this: when the cub inside the mother begins to move, having claws much sharper than those of any other beast, it tears the womb. As it grows larger, it scratches much more, until at last the time of birth approaches, and there is nothing left of the womb in sound condition. In just the same way, if vipers and the winged serpents of the Arabians reproduced in the ordinary course of their nature, man could not live on the earth. But as it is, when they mate, and the male is in the act of generation, as he releases his seed, the female seizes his neck, fastens onto it, and does not let go until she has eaten through it. The male dies in the manner I have described, but the female pays the penalty for the male in this way. The young, while still in the womb, avenge their father by eating through their mother, and after eating through her belly they make their own way out. Other serpents, however, which are not harmful to man, lay eggs and hatch a very large number of offspring from them. Vipers are spread over the whole earth, but the winged serpents are found in great numbers together in Arabia and in no other land, and that is why they appear numerous. This, then, is how the Arabians obtain frankincense. Kasha is obtained as follows. They bind up their whole body and face, except only the eyes, and cowhide and other kinds of skins, and then go to gather the kasha. It grows in a pool that is not very deep, and around and in the pool there live winged creatures that closely resemble bats. They squeak horribly and are brave fighters. The men must keep these creatures away from their eyes, and so they cut the kasha. Semen they collect in a still more marvelous way. They cannot say where it grows or what land produces it, except that some say, and the account is probable, that it grows in the regions where Dionysos was brought up. They say that large birds carry the dried sticks that we have learned from the Phoenicians to call cinnamon to nests made of clay and fixed onto steep mountain cliffs, which no man can find a way to climb. In dealing with this, the Arabians used the following contrivance. They cut up the limbs of dead oxen, asses, and their other beasts of burden into pieces as large as convenient, carry them to these places, lay them down not far from the nests, and withdraw to a distance. The birds fly down and carry the limbs of the beasts of burden off to their nests, but the nests cannot bear the weight, so they break down and fall to the ground. Then the men come up and collect the cinnamon. In this way cinnamon is collected and comes from this nation to the other countries of the world. The mastich, which the Arabians call ledanon, comes in an even more extraordinary way. Although it is the sweetest, scented of all things, it is found in the foulest smelling place, in the beards of he-goats, where it is produced like resin from wood. It is useful in making many perfumes, and the Arabians use it more than anything else as incense. Let what has been said be enough about spices. From the land of Arabia there blows a scent of them that is wonderfully sweet. Arabia also has two kinds of sheep worthy of admiration, found in no other land. One kind has a long tail, not less than 3 cubits in length. If these tails were allowed to drag behind them, the sheep would have sores from the tails being worn against the ground. But as it is, every shepherd knows enough carpentry to make little carts, which they tie under the tails, fastening each animal's tail to its own little cart. The other kind of sheep has a broad tail, as much as a cubit wide. As one passes beyond the place of the midday, the Ethiopian land stretches farthest of all inhabited lands toward the sunset. It produces gold in abundance, huge elephants, wild trees of every kind, ebony, and men who are the tallest, most beautiful, and longest lived of all men. These are the farthest regions in Asia and Libya. As for the farthest regions of Europe toward the west, I cannot speak with certainty. I do not accept the tale that there is a river called Herodotus in a barbarian tongue flowing into the sea that lies toward the north wind, from which amber is said to come. Nor do I know that the tin islands really exist, from which tin comes to us. First, the very name Herodotus shows that it is Hellenic and does not belong to a barbarian language, but was invented by some poet. Second, although I took pains to find out, I have not been able to hear from anyone who has seen it with his own eyes that there is a sea on the other side of Europe. However that may be, tin and amber certainly come to us from the farthest edge of Europe. Again, toward the north of Europe, there is plainly a quantity of gold far greater than in any other land. As to how it is obtained, I cannot say for certain here either, but it is said to be carried off from griffins by the Arimaspians, a one-eyed race of men. I do not believe this tale either, that nature produces one-eyed men who in all other respects are like other men. Still, it seems that the extremities which bound the rest of the world on every side and enclose it in the middle possess the things that we consider most beautiful and most rare. There is a plain in Asia bounded on every side by mountains, and through these mountains there are 5 clefts. This plain once belonged to the Khwarezmians, and it lies on the borders of the Khwarezmians themselves, the Hyrcanians, the Parthians, the Serangians, and the Thamanians. But from the time when the Persians began to rule, it has belonged to the king. From the enclosing mountain I have mentioned there flows a great river, called Aix. Formerly this river watered the lands of the peoples just named, for it was divided into 5 streams and led through a separate cleft in the mountains to each separate nation. But since they came under Persian rule, they have suffered in the following way. The king built up the clefts in the mountains and set gates at each cleft. Since the water has been shut off from its outlet, the plain inside the mountains has been turned into a sea, because the river runs into it, and has no way out in any direction. So the peoples who formerly used the water are now in great distress because they cannot use it. In winter they have rain from heaven, as other men do, but in summer they need the water when they sow millet and sesame. Since the water is not granted to them, they come to the Persians, both the men and their wives, and stand at the gates of the king's court crying and wailing. Then the king orders the gates leading to the land of those who need it most to be opened. When their land has drunk its fill of the water, those gates are closed, and he orders the gates open for others, namely those among the remaining peoples who are most in need. As I have heard, he exacts large sums of money for opening the gates in addition to the regular tribute. So much for these matters. Of the 7 men who had risen against the Magi, one, Intaphrenes, happened to be put to death immediately after their revolt because of an outrage that I shall relate. He wished to enter the king's palace and speak with the king. The law was indeed that those who had risen against the Magi were permitted to go into the king's presence without anyone announcing them, unless the king happened to be lying with his wife. Therefore Intaphrenes did not think it proper that anyone should announce his coming. Since he was one of the 7, he wished to enter. But the gatekeeper and the bearer of messages tried to prevent him, saying that the king was lying with his wife. Intaphrenes, believing that they were not telling the truth, drew his sword, cut off their ears and noses, strung these on his horse's bridle, tied them around their necks, and let them go. The men then showed themselves to the king and told him why they had suffered this. Darius feared that the 6 might have done it by common agreement, so he sent for each one separately and tested his feelings, to learn whether he approved of what had been done. When he was fully assured that Intaphrenes had not acted in concert with them, he seized Intaphrenes himself, his sons, and all his kinsmen, being strongly inclined to believe that Intaphrenes was plotting rebellion against him with the help of his relatives. After seizing them, he put them in chains as men destined for execution. Then the wife of Intaphrenes came constantly to the doors of the king's court, weeping and lamenting. By doing this continually in the same way, she moved Darius to pity her. Woman, King Darius grants you the right to save from death one of your kinsmen who are lying in chains, whichever one of them all you wish. After considering the matter by herself, she answered that if the king truly granted her the life of one, she chose her brother from among them all. Darius was told this, and was amazed by her answer. He sent again and addressed her, asking what had been in her mind when she left her husband and children to die and chose her brother to survive, since surely he was less near to her in blood than her children and less dear to her than her husband. O king, if heaven willed, I might have another husband and other children if I lost these, but I could by no means have another brother, since my father and my mother are no longer alive. This was in my mind when I spoke those words. Darius thought that the woman had spoken well, and because he was pleased with her, he released not only the man whose life she had asked for, but also the eldest of her sons. All the others he put to death. Thus one of the 7 perished immediately in the manner that has been told. About the time of the sickness of Cambyses, the following events had taken place. There was a Persian named Oroetes, who had been appointed by Cyrus to be governor of the province of Sardes. This man set his desire on an unholy deed. Although he had never suffered anything from Polycrates the Samian, nor heard any offensive word from him, nor even seen him before that time, he wanted to seize him and put him to death. Most who report the matter give the following reason. Oroetes and another Persian, named Mithridates, ruler of the province of Daskylion, were sitting at the door of the king's court. Their words turned into a quarrel, and as they disputed over their claims to excellence, Mithridates taunted Oroetes, asking whether he counted himself a man when he had not yet won for the king the island of Samos, which lay close to his province and was so exceedingly easy to conquer that one of its own natives had risen against the government with 15 men-at-arms, gained possession of the island, and was now its despot. Some say that when Oroetes heard this, and was stung by the reproach, he formed the desire not so much to take vengeance on the man who had spoken, as to destroy Polycrates at all costs, because on account of Polycrates he had been spoken of badly. A smaller number of those who tell the tale say instead that Oroetes sent a herald to Samos to ask for something, though what it was is not stated. Polycrates happened to be lying down in the men's chamber of his palace, and Anacreon of Teos was present with him. Somehow, whether by intention and because he made no account of Oroetes' business, or because some chance brought it about, the envoy of Oroetes came into his presence and spoke with him, but Polycrates, who happened to be turned toward the wall, neither turned around nor gave any answer. The cause of Polycrates' death is therefore reported in these 2 different ways, and we may believe whichever of them we please. Oroetes, who had his residence at the Magnesia situated on the river Maeander, sent Miosos the son of Gyges, a Lydian, to Samos with a message, because he had perceived the designs of Polycrates. Polycrates was the first of the Hellenes known to us who set his mind on gaining command of the sea, except Minos the Cynocian and anyone else who may have held command of the sea before his time. Of what we call the mortal race, Polycrates was the first, and he had great expectation of becoming ruler of Ionia and the islands. So Oroetes, having perceived this design, sent a message to him. The message said that Oroetes had heard Polycrates was making plans to gain great power, but did not have wealth equal to his high thoughts. If Polycrates would do as Oroetes said, he would do well for himself and also save Oroetes from destruction, for King Cambyses, he said, was planning his death, and this had been reported to him beyond doubt. Polycrates was to carry Oroetes himself and his wealth out of danger. Of the wealth Polycrates could keep one part for himself and let Oroetes keep one part, and then, so far as wealth could bring it about, Polycrates would be ruler of all Hellas. If Polycrates did not believe what Oroetes said about the money, he should send the person he trusted most, and Oroetes would show it to him. When Polycrates heard this, he rejoiced and was inclined to agree. Since he had, it seems, a great desire for wealth, he first sent Meandrios the son of Meandrios, a native of Samos, and his secretary, to inspect it. This was the same man who, not long after these events, dedicated all the ornaments of the men's chamber in Polycrates' palace, ornaments well worth seeing, as an offering to the temple of Hera. When Oroetes heard that the man sent to examine the money could soon be expected, he did the following. He filled 8 chests with stones, leaving only a shallow space at the very top of each, and laid gold over the stones. Then he tied up the chests and kept them ready. Meandrios came, looked at them, and brought back word to Polycrates. Polycrates then prepared to set out, although the diviners and his friends strongly tried to dissuade him, and although his daughter had seen a vision in sleep. It seemed to her that her father was raised up high, bathed by Zeus and anointed by the sun. After seeing this vision, she used every effort to keep Polycrates from leaving his own land to go to Oroetes. Besides this, as he was going to his 50-oared galley, she accompanied his departure with prophetic words. He threatened her that if he returned safely, she would remain unmarried for a long time, but she prayed that this might happen, because, she said, she would rather remain unmarried for a long time than be an orphan who had lost her father. Polycrates, however, disregarded every piece of advice and sailed to Oroetes, taking with him, besides many other friends, Democedes the son of Caliphon, a man of Croton, who was a physician and practiced his art better than any other man of his time. When Polycrates arrived at Magnesia, he was miserably put to death in a way unworthy both of himself and of his high ambition. Except for those who become despots of the Syracusans, no other Hellenic despot deserves to be compared with Polycrates in magnificence. After Oroetes killed him in a manner not fit to be told, he impaled his body. Of those who had accompanied him, he released as many as were Samians, telling them to be grateful to him, because they were free men. But all those in his company, who were either allies or servants, he treated as slaves and kept. By being hung up, Polycrates completely fulfilled his daughter's vision. He was bathed by Zeus whenever it rained, and anointed by the sun as moisture came out from his own body. So ended the great prosperity of Polycrates, just as Amasis the king of Egypt had foretold to him. Not long afterward, retribution in turn overtook Oroetes for the murder of Polycrates. After the death of Cambyses and the reign of the Magians, Oroetes remained at Sardes and rendered no service to the Persians when they had been deprived of their empire by the Medes. Moreover, during this time of disturbance he killed Mithridates, the governor in Dascylion, who had brought up the matter of Polycrates against him as a reproach, and he also killed Cranestes the son of Mithridates. Both were men of reputation among the Persians. Besides other various acts of insolence, once when a bearer of messages came to him from Darius, he was displeased with the message the man brought, so he set men to lie in wait for him on the road as he returned, killed him, and made away with the bodies of both the man and his horse. When Darius had come to the throne, he wanted to take vengeance on Oroetes for all his wrongdoings, and especially for the murder of Mithridates and his son. Still, he did not think it wise to act openly and send an army against him, since his own affairs were still unsettled, and he had only recently come to power. He also heard that Oroetes was very strong, for he had a bodyguard of 1,000 Persian spearmen and possessed the divisions of Phrygia, Lydia, and Ionia. Therefore Darius devised the following plan. He called together the Persians of highest reputation and addressed them. Persians, which of you will undertake to perform this task for me with wisdom, and not by force or with uproar? Where wisdom is needed, force is unnecessary. Which of you, I say, will either bring Oroetes to me alive or kill him? He has never yet done any service for the Persians, and on the other hand he has done them great harm. First he destroyed 2 of us, Mithridates and his son. Then he kills the men sent by me to summon him, displaying intolerable insolence. Before he does any further harm to the Persians, we must stop his course by death. Thus Darius asked, and 30 men undertook the matter, each one separately wanting to do it himself. Darius stopped their dispute and told them to cast lots. When they cast lots, Bygaios the son of Artauntes drew the lot from among them all. Having obtained it, Bygaios acted in this way. He wrote many papers dealing with various matters, set the seal of Darius on them, and went with them to Sardes. When he arrived there and came into the presence of Oroetes, he uncovered the papers one after another and gave them to the royal secretary to read, for all provincial governors have royal secretaries. Bygaios gave the papers in this order in order to test the spearmen of the guard, and see whether they would accept the movement to revolt from Oroetes. When he saw that they paid great reverence to the papers, and still more to the words read from them, he gave another paper, which contained these words: Persians, King Darius forbids you to serve as guards to Oroetes. When they heard this, they lowered the points of their spears before him. Then Bygaios, seeing that they obeyed the paper in this matter, took courage from it and gave the last paper to the secretary. And it was written, King Darius commands the Persians who are in Sardes to kill Oroetes. When the spearmen of the guard heard this, they drew their swords and killed him at once. Thus retribution for the murder of Polycrates the Samian overtook Oroetes. After the wealth of Oroetes had come, or had been carried, up to Susa, it happened not long afterward that King Darius, while hunting wild beasts, twisted his foot as he leapt down from his horse. The twist was, it seems, a violent one, for the ball of the ankle joint was put out of its socket. Darius had been accustomed to keep around him the Egyptians who were considered the foremost men in the art of medicine, and he used their help then. But by wrenching and forcing the foot, they continually made the injury worse. For 7 days and 7 nights Darius could not sleep because of the pain he suffered. At last, on the 8th day, when he was in a wretched state, someone who had previously heard talk at Sardes about the skill of Democedes of Croton reported this to Darius. Darius ordered that Democedes be brought into his presence immediately. So they found him somewhere unnoticed among the slaves of Oroetes and brought him forward into the middle, dragging fetters behind him and clothed in rags. When Democedes had been placed before them, Darius asked him whether he understood the art of medicine. Democedes would not admit it, fearing that if he revealed what he was, he might lose forever the hope of returning to Hellas. But it was clear to Darius that he understood the art and was pretending otherwise, and he ordered those who had brought him there to produce scourges and pricking instruments. At that Democedes spoke out. He said that he did not understand the art exactly, but that he had spent time with a physician and had some poor knowledge of it. Then Darius committed the case to him. Democedes used Hellenic drugs and applied gentle remedies after the earlier violent treatments. He caused Darius to sleep, and in a short time made him completely well, though Darius had never expected to be sound of foot again. After this, Darius presented Democedes with 2 pairs of golden fetters. Democedes asked him whether he had deliberately given him a double share of his suffering, because he had made him well. Darius was pleased by this saying and sent him to visit his wives. When the eunuchs brought him in, they told the women that this was the man who had restored the king's life. Then each of the women plunged a cup into the gold chest and presented Democedes with so abundant a gift that his servant, whose name was Scyton, followed behind and gathered up the coins that fell from the cups, collecting a very large sum of gold for himself. This Democedes came from Croton, and he became the associate of Polycrates in the following way. At Croton he lived in conflict with his father, who had a harsh temper. When he could no longer endure him, he left and came to Aegina. Once established there, in the first year he surpassed all the other physicians, although he was without equipment and had none of the instruments used in the art. In the next year the Aeginetan state hired him for a payment of 1 talent. In the 3rd year the Athenians hired him for 100 pounds weight of silver, and in the 4th Polycrates hired him for 2 talents. In this way he came to Samos. It was chiefly because of this man that the physicians of Croton gained their reputation, for these events took place at the time when the physicians of Croton began to be spoken of as the first in Hellas, while the Kyrenians were reputed to hold 2nd place. About the same time also, the Argives had the reputation of being the first musicians in Hellas.
And there we will pause, with Democedes racing for home across the sea 1 jump ahead of his Persian minders, and the first Persian ships nosing west toward Greece and Italy on his account. Next time, in the last part of the book, part 18, how a single borrowed cloak won back the island of Samos, and how one man cut off his own nose to hand Darius the greatest city in the world. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.